Germany depended. What had begun as an aircraft many opponents dismissed because of its appearance had become one of the most versatile combat aircraft of the European theater. Its success did not rest on elegance. It rested on intelligent engineering, disciplined tactics, exceptional survivability, and the relentless power of 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns that could transform a brief firing pass into a decisive victory. Yet the Thunderbolt's greatest test still lay ahead. In early 1944, the air war over Europe reached a turning point unlike anything either side had experienced before. Massive bomber offensives, determined Luftwaffe resistance, and battles fought across thousands of square miles of sky would determine who controlled the air above Nazi Germany, and the P-47 would stand at the center of that struggle. February 20, 1944. Dawn broke slowly over eastern England, revealing hundreds of aircraft lined across airfields that only a few years earlier had been quiet stretches of farmland. Frost still clung to the grass as mechanics completed their final inspections beneath portable lamps. Armorers secured ammunition belts inside the wings of waiting Thunderbolts, carefully feeding thousands of .50 caliber rounds into each aircraft. Crew chiefs checked fuel lines, tightened engine panels, and gave their pilots the familiar thumbs up before stepping away. Across dozens of American bases, engines began to start. One after another, the deep, unmistakable rumble of Pratt Whitney R-2800 engines spread across the countryside. Unlike the sharper sound of liquid-cooled inline engines, the Thunderbolt's massive radial produced a heavy mechanical roar that seemed to shake the cold morning air itself. Soon, entire squadrons were taxiing toward runways, joining one of the largest coordinated air operations attempted up to that point in the European war. The campaign became known as Big Week. Between February 20 and February 25, 1944, the United States 8th Air Force and Britain's Royal Air Force launched a sustained series of attacks against Germany's aircraft industry. Rather than concentrating on a single city, Allied planners targeted factories producing fighters, engines, aircraft components, and assembly facilities across the Reich. Their objective extended beyond destroying buildings. They wanted to force the Luftwaffe into a decisive battle in the air. German commanders understood exactly what was happening. Every factory threatened by Allied bombers represented a vital link in Germany's ability to replace combat losses. Aircraft production had become essential. Without new fighters, experienced pilots could not defend the homeland or challenge the growing strength of Allied air power. As radar stations detected incoming bomber streams, fighter control centers issued urgent orders across northern Germany and occupied Europe. Intercept. Delay. Destroy. Within minutes, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s climbed from their airfields toward the approaching formations. Veteran pilots knew that allowing American bombers to strike unopposed would have serious consequences. Many had already fought dozens, sometimes hundreds, of combat sorties. Their confidence remained high despite increasing Allied numerical superiority. Waiting for them were not only bombers. Escorting the formations flew growing numbers of Republic P-47 Thunderbolts. By early 1944, Thunderbolt pilots had accumulated valuable experience. They no longer relied solely on defensive escort tactics. Commanders increasingly authorized fighter sweeps ahead of bomber formations, allowing American pilots to engage German interceptors before they reached the bombers. This shift transformed the nature of the air war. Instead of reacting, Thunderbolt squadrons now hunted. Flying several thousand feet above the bomber stream, they searched constantly for climbing enemy fighters. The altitude advantage provided options. Pilots could choose when to attack, converting height into speed during steep diving passes. Once committed, the Thunderbolt accelerated rapidly, its heavy airframe slicing through the freezing air with remarkable stability. One encounter after another demonstrated how dramatically American tactics had evolved. German formations climbing toward the bombers suddenly found Thunderbolts descending from above. Closing speeds became enormous. Decisions had to be made within seconds. Brake left. Brake right. Climb. Dive. Fire. Then came the sound every Luftwaffe pilot quickly learned to recognize. 8 synchronized Browning machine guns erupted almost simultaneously. From the attacker's perspective, the firing burst lasted only moments. From the defender's perspective, it felt instantaneous. Dense streams of tracer rounds crossed the sky, converging where American armorers had harmonized the guns before takeoff. A pilot who underestimated the closing speed often discovered too late that hundreds of bullets were already racing toward him. Several German aircraft disintegrated under concentrated fire. Others entered uncontrolled spins after control surfaces failed or engines were struck. Some pilots escaped by parachute, while others never left their aircraft. Air combat remained brutally unforgiving. A mistake lasting only a second could determine the outcome. Yet the Thunderbolt's contribution extended beyond victories claimed. Its mere presence forced German fighter units into increasingly difficult decisions. If they concentrated on the bombers, escort fighters attacked from advantageous positions. If they turned to engage the escorts, bomber formations continued toward their targets with reduced opposition. The Luftwaffe found itself fighting two battles simultaneously, protecting Germany's industrial centers while surviving increasingly capable Allied fighter tactics. The Thunderbolt also demonstrated another quality that became invaluable during Big Week. German anti-aircraft defenses were among the heaviest in the world. Batteries of light and heavy flak surrounded major industrial cities, filling the sky with thousands of exploding shells. Black bursts appeared around bomber formations with terrifying regularity. Escort fighters often flew through the same defensive fire while maneuvering against enemy aircraft. Damage became inevitable. Thunderbolts returned across the North Sea bearing unmistakable evidence of the campaign. Mechanics counted bullet holes through wings, fuselages, and tail sections. Flak fragments scarred engine cowlings. Canopies were cracked. Landing gear doors hung twisted. Oil streaked across aluminum skin from damaged engines. Yet many aircraft came home. Pilots climbed from cockpits exhausted, sometimes discovering damage they had never realized existed during combat. Maintenance crews immediately began preparing surviving aircraft for the next day's mission, replacing panels, repairing hydraulic systems, changing propellers, and installing fresh ammunition belts. Big Week continued day after day. Factories burned. Aircraft assembly lines slowed. The Luftwaffe fought with determination, but each interception cost experienced pilots and irreplaceable aircraft. American bomber losses remained serious, yet German losses increasingly proved more difficult to replace. The balance that had once favored the defenders was beginning to shift. And above the smoke rising from Germany's industrial cities, the oversized fighter once dismissed as too heavy and too awkward was proving that its greatest strength had never been graceful maneuvering. Its strength was endurance. Its strength was disciplined aggression. And when 8.50 caliber machine guns opened fire from close range, very few opponents continued laughing. The struggle for air superiority, however, was far from over. Within months, the skies above Normandy would witness an even greater test, one that would shape not only the outcome of the air war, but the success of the Allied invasion of Western Europe itself. June 6, 1944. Before the first rays of sunlight reached the beaches of Normandy, the sky above the English Channel was already alive with aircraft. Thousands of Allied airplanes, transport aircraft towing gliders, medium bombers, heavy bombers, reconnaissance planes, and fighters crossed the water in carefully coordinated waves. It was the largest amphibious invasion in history, and every soldier stepping ashore depended upon one critical condition before anything else. The Allies had to control the sky. Years earlier, such a guarantee would have been impossible. In 1940, the Luftwaffe had dominated much of Western Europe, supporting German armored advances with devastating speed. By the summer of 1944, however, the balance had changed dramatically. Months of relentless bombing, mounting pilot losses, and shrinking fuel supplies had weakened Germany's once formidable air force. The transformation had not happened overnight. It had been earned through countless escort missions, air battles, and sacrifices made high above occupied Europe. The P-47 Thunderbolt had become one of the aircraft helping make that transformation possible. On D-Day itself, Thunderbolts flew a wide variety of missions. Some escorted bombers striking coastal defenses and transportation hubs. Others patrolled inland routes where German fighters might attempt to interfere with the invasion. As the landings expanded throughout the day, more P-47s shifted to fighter-bomber duties, attacking roads, railways, bridges, and military convoys rushing toward Normandy. For German commanders, speed was everything. Field Marshal Owen Rommel had long argued that any Allied invasion had to be defeated within the first 24 hours. Once the Allies secured a stable beachhead and began unloading men, tanks, artillery, fuel, and ammunition, pushing them back into the sea would become vastly more difficult. Reinforcements from across France therefore received urgent orders to move toward the invasion front as quickly as possible. But movement itself had become dangerous. Every daylight convoy risked detection from Allied reconnaissance aircraft. Once spotted, the information moved rapidly through radio networks linking ground observers, headquarters, and tactical air units. Thunderbolts often received target coordinates while already airborne, redirecting toward German troop columns before they could reach the battlefield. From several thousand feet above the French countryside, experienced pilots searched for the unmistakable signs of military movement. A line of trucks winding along a country road. A train emerging from a wooded cutting. A bridge crowded with armored vehicles. Columns of dust rising from hidden roads. When a target was confirmed, the attack usually unfolded with practiced precision. The flight leader rolled into a dive first. The remaining aircraft followed at carefully spaced intervals. As the Thunderbolt accelerated, its broad wings remained remarkably steady despite the increasing speed. Pilots selected bombs, rockets, or machine guns depending upon the target waiting below. Against troop concentrations or transport vehicles, the 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns often proved more than sufficient. The first burst usually struck before soldiers on the ground fully understood what was happening. Tracer rounds skipped across roads, smashed through truck engines, ignited fuel drums, and shredded lightly protected vehicles. Drivers abandoned burning transports, while surviving troops scattered into fields, ditches, and tree lines. Seconds later, another Thunderbolt swept over the same road, extending the attack before climbing sharply back into the sky. These repeated strikes produced effects beyond the immediate destruction. German supply schedules slowed dramatically. Bridges became unusable. Fuel deliveries arrived late or not at all. Artillery units struggled to receive ammunition. Reserve formations lost valuable hours moving only a few miles. Entire operational plans unraveled because roads that appeared open on maps had become deadly corridors beneath Allied air superiority. The Thunderbolt's rugged construction again proved indispensable. Unlike high-altitude escort missions, fighter-bomber operations forced pilots into the range of every anti-aircraft weapon available. German defenders responded with rifles, machine guns, automatic cannon, and concentrated flak batteries. Every attack exposed the aircraft to intense fire. Combat photographs from the Normandy campaign reveal Thunderbolts returning with astonishing levels of damage. Engine cowlings pierced by shell fragments. Wing panels torn open. Propeller blades chipped by ground fire. Hydraulic systems leaking fluid across the fuselage. Yet many pilots landed safely despite damage that seemed impossible for a single-engine fighter to survive. Ground crews became experts in rapid repair. Working long hours on temporary airfields established in France after the invasion, mechanics replaced damaged panels, repaired control surfaces, changed engines, and rearmed aircraft with remarkable efficiency. A Thunderbolt that returned riddled with bullet holes one evening often flew another combat sortie the following morning. As Allied armies fought through the dense hedgerows of Normandy, close air support became increasingly important. One of the most significant operations occurred during Operation Cobra, launched on July 25, 1944. Designed to break the stalemate west of Saint-Lô, the offensive relied upon massive aerial bombardment followed by a concentrated ground assault. While heavy bombers struck defensive positions, fighter bombers, including large numbers of P-47 Thunderbolts, attacked roads, vehicles, artillery positions, and retreating forces behind the front. The combined pressure proved overwhelming. German formations, already weakened by weeks of fighting, found it increasingly difficult to regroup under constant air attack. Every movement during daylight risked immediate interception. Columns that attempted to withdraw often encountered Thunderbolts circling overhead, waiting for exactly such opportunities. By August, the consequences became unmistakable during the Falaise pocket. As Allied armies closed around large German formations attempting to escape eastern Normandy, roads filled with vehicles, abandoned equipment, horse-drawn wagons, and retreating soldiers. Fighter bombers repeatedly attacked the congested routes, contributing to the destruction of transport and severely disrupting organized withdrawal. Although artillery and ground forces inflicted much of the devastation, Allied tactical air power, including the P-47, played a significant role in turning retreat into chaos. Meanwhile, high above the battlefield, the Luftwaffe appeared only in scattered numbers. The transformation from 1943 was extraordinary. Only a year earlier, German fighter units had challenged nearly every major Allied bombing mission. Now, shortages of experienced pilots, serviceable aircraft, and aviation fuel limited their ability to contest Allied control of the air. When German fighters did appear, they often faced experienced American pilots flying aircraft whose strengths had been refined through months of relentless combat. The Thunderbolt had become far more than an escort. It had become a guardian of bomber formations, a hunter of enemy fighters, a destroyer of transportation networks, and a constant presence over advancing Allied armies. The same aircraft once dismissed for its size had helped reshape the battlefield itself. Its massive engine carried it through missions that ranged from the icy skies over Germany to the hedgerows of France. Its rugged airframe brought countless pilots home. And its 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns had earned respect not through reputation, but through repeated proof in combat. By the time Allied forces crossed into Germany during the final months of the war, few Luftwaffe veterans still underestimated the Thunderbolt. The laughter that had greeted its unusual appearance had long since disappeared, replaced by a hard-earned understanding that the largest fighter in the sky could also be one of its deadliest. As the summer of 1944 gave way to autumn, the character of the air war over Europe had changed beyond recognition. Just a year earlier, every American bomber mission deep into Germany had carried the expectation of severe losses. Fighter escorts often lacked the range to remain with the bombers for the entire journey, leaving formations exposed during the most dangerous portions of the mission. The Luftwaffe had exploited those gaps with deadly efficiency. By late 1944, that advantage had largely disappeared. The arrival of long-range escort fighters such as the North American P-51 Mustang certainly played a decisive role, but the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had already helped wear down the Luftwaffe during the critical months before air superiority was firmly established. Thousands of escort sorties, fighter sweeps, and ground attack missions gradually eroded Germany's ability to defend its own skies. Victory did not come from a single battle or a single aircraft. It emerged through relentless pressure applied day after day across the entire European theater. The numbers reflected that relentless campaign. During the war, more than 15,600 P-47 Thunderbolts were produced, making it one of the most numerous American fighters ever built. In Europe, Thunderbolt pilots flew hundreds of thousands of operational sorties. They destroyed enemy aircraft in the air and on the ground, attacked locomotives, bridges, vehicles, artillery positions, supply depots, and communication centers. By the end of the conflict, the P-47 had dropped thousands of tons of bombs and fired millions of rounds of .50 caliber ammunition in combat. Statistics, however, reveal only part of the story. The true measure of the Thunderbolt lay in the experiences of the men who depended on it. Again and again, American pilots described returning from missions in aircraft that appeared incapable of flying. Maintenance crews often stood in disbelief as damaged fighters rolled onto dispersal areas with shredded wings, punctured fuselages, and engines scarred by enemy fire. There were documented cases of Thunderbolts landing with entire sections of control surfaces damaged beyond recognition. Others arrived with cylinders shot away from the radial engine or propeller blades bent by debris and shell fragments. Pilots recounted discovering dozens, even hundreds, of bullet holes only after climbing from the cockpit. One of the aircraft's greatest strengths had never appeared in performance charts. It gave its pilots another chance. Another chance to cross the English Channel. Another chance to reach a friendly airfield. Another chance to see their families again after the war. For every aircraft that returned heavily damaged, countless hours of work followed. Ground crews labored through rain, mud, freezing temperatures, and enemy air raids to repair machines as quickly as possible. They replaced engines, patched wings, rewired electrical systems, and reloaded thousands of rounds of ammunition before sending the same aircraft back into combat. The relationship between pilot and crew chief became deeply personal. A pilot trusted his life to the people who maintained the aircraft, while mechanics measured success not only by completed repairs but by seeing familiar faces return safely after each mission. German reports also reflected the changing reality. Early wartime intelligence frequently described the P-47 as large, heavily built, and less maneuverable than many European fighters. Those observations were accurate, but they proved incomplete. As combat experience accumulated, Luftwaffe assessments increasingly emphasized the Thunderbolt's strengths instead. Its exceptional diving speed, its ability to absorb punishment, its effectiveness as a fighter bomber. German pilots learned that attacking a Thunderbolt required discipline and favorable positioning. Allowing one to gain altitude or build speed often shifted the advantage. Chasing it into a steep dive could be dangerous, while meeting it head-on exposed an aircraft to an extraordinary volume of machine gun fire. The Luftwaffe attempted to adapt. Pilots were instructed to exploit the Thunderbolt's weaker low-speed turning performance whenever possible. Experienced leaders emphasized coordinated attacks rather than isolated engagements. Yet these tactical adjustments became increasingly difficult to execute as Germany faced mounting shortages of trained aviators. By late 1944, the problem was no longer simply replacing aircraft. It was replacing experience. Many of Germany's finest fighter pilots had been killed, wounded, or captured after years of continuous combat. New pilots often entered service with only a fraction of the flying hours their predecessors had received before the war. Fuel shortages reduced training opportunities even further. Young aviators found themselves confronting veteran Allied pilots who had survived dozens of missions and understood every strength of their aircraft. The imbalance grew steadily wider. Thunderbolt squadrons, meanwhile, benefited from expanding operational knowledge. Combat lessons circulated rapidly between units. Tactics evolved. Formation discipline improved. Maintenance procedures became more efficient. Pilots learned how to coordinate attacks with artillery, reconnaissance aircraft, and advancing ground forces. The P-47 was no longer simply an escort fighter. It had become one of the most versatile weapons available to Allied commanders. Its impact reached far beyond individual victories in aerial combat. Destroyed locomotives delayed troop movements. Damaged bridges slowed reinforcements. Burning fuel convoys disrupted armored operations. Repeated attacks forced German units to travel at night, reducing operational flexibility and increasing confusion. Each mission imposed another cost on an already strained military system. By the closing months of the war, Allied soldiers advancing across Western Europe often regarded the appearance of Thunderbolts overhead as reassurance that friendly airpower remained firmly in control. For German forces on the ground, the same sound carried a very different meaning. It signaled the possibility that movement itself had become a dangerous act. The aircraft that many opponents had once dismissed because of its unusual size had become an unmistakable symbol of Allied air superiority. And although the war in Europe was drawing toward its conclusion, the legacy of the Thunderbolt was only beginning to take shape. Its influence would extend well beyond 1945, shaping future air combat doctrine and earning a place among the most respected fighters of the Second World War. The fighting in Europe ended on May 8, 1945, when Germany formally surrendered to the Allied powers. Across the continent, the roar of combat aircraft gradually faded, replaced by the long process of rebuilding cities, industries, and lives shattered by nearly 6 years of war. Thousands of military aircraft that had once filled the skies were retired, scrapped, or placed into storage. Yet a select few earned a lasting reputation that endured long after the final shot had been fired. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was one of them. Its legacy rested not on a single spectacular victory or a legendary ace alone, but on the consistency with which it performed every mission asked of it. It escorted bombers into the heart of Germany. It fought experienced Luftwaffe pilots at high altitude. It destroyed trains, bridges, armored columns, and supply convoys. It supported Allied soldiers from the beaches of Normandy to the Rhine River. Few aircraft of the Second World War demonstrated such versatility across so many different roles. By the end of the conflict, Thunderbolt pilots had claimed more than 3,700 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, while thousands more were destroyed on the ground during strafing attacks against airfields and transportation hubs. The aircraft also flew well over 500,000 combat sorties and delivered an enormous weight of bombs and rockets in addition to the millions of .50 caliber rounds fired during the war. Those achievements reflected not only the capabilities of the machine but also the skill and endurance of the men who flew and maintained it. Many of the Thunderbolt's greatest strengths were not immediately obvious to observers. Its rugged construction rarely appeared in newspaper headlines, yet countless veterans later credited that strength with saving their lives. Stories circulated throughout the Army Air Forces of pilots returning with shattered windscreens, damaged engines, torn wings, and control systems barely functioning. Some aircraft landed missing large sections of their tail surfaces. Others arrived with tires destroyed, hydraulic systems leaking, or entire rows of engine cylinders damaged by anti-aircraft fire. The Thunderbolt became known for bringing its pilots home when many believed it could not. That reputation created a unique bond between the aircraft and those who flew it. Veterans often recalled that climbing into the cockpit inspired confidence rather than anxiety. They understood its limitations. They knew it would never outturn every opponent in a slow-speed fight. But they also knew that if they respected the aircraft's strengths, its speed in a dive, its stability, its firepower, and its durability, it would reward disciplined flying. Many of America's highest-scoring P-47 aces demonstrated exactly that principle. Pilots such as Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, who became one of the leading American fighter aces in the European theater, achieved remarkable success while flying the Thunderbolt. Others, including Robert S. Johnson, repeatedly survived encounters that might have ended differently in less rugged aircraft. Johnson famously described one mission in which his badly damaged P-47 absorbed repeated attacks yet still managed to carry him safely home. Stories like these helped reinforce the aircraft's reputation among both pilots and historians. The Thunderbolt's influence extended beyond the war itself. After 1945, many nations continued operating surplus P-47s for years. Several air forces around the world employed them in training, air defense, and ground attack roles well into the post-war era. Their reliability and strong construction made them valuable even as became central elements of post-war doctrine. Modern attack aircraft would evolve dramatically in the decades that followed, but the underlying principle remained familiar: an aircraft capable of surviving enemy fire while delivering accurate and sustained attacks could shape the outcome of battles far beyond the front line. The Thunderbolt had proven that principle repeatedly across Europe. It had shown that an aircraft did not need to be the lightest or the most agile to dominate the battlefield. Sound engineering, overwhelming firepower, disciplined tactics, and dependable reliability could prove just as decisive. Perhaps that is why the Thunderbolt continues to fascinate historians today. Its appearance challenged expectations. Its combat record overturned them. The bulky fighter that some dismissed as too large became one of the most effective combat aircraft of the Second World War. Its broad wings carried 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns that earned the respect of friend and foe alike. Its massive radial engine pulled damaged aircraft across the English Channel when logic suggested they should have fallen from the sky. Its pilots adapted their tactics instead of forcing the machine to become something it was never designed to be. In doing so, they transformed skepticism into confidence, and confidence into victory. By the time the guns finally fell silent in Europe, very few German pilots still viewed the Thunderbolt as an awkward outsider. Experience had taught a far more enduring lesson. The fighter that once inspired laughter had become one of the Luftwaffe's most respected and most dangerous opponents. When the Second World War is remembered, history often celebrates the aircraft that were the fastest, the most elegant, or the most revolutionary. The sleek silhouette of the Spitfire, the long range of the Mustang, and the formidable reputation of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 have become enduring symbols of the air war over Europe. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt earned its place for a different reason. It never tried to be the lightest fighter in the sky. It never claimed to outturn every opponent. Its designers accepted compromises that many believed would prevent it from succeeding. They built an aircraft around strength instead of grace, around endurance instead of appearance, and around overwhelming firepower instead of delicate precision. In combat, those decisions proved remarkably wise. The Thunderbolt escorted vulnerable bomber crews through some of the most heavily defended airspace in the world. It fought veteran Luftwaffe pilots at altitudes where every decision lasted only fractions of a second. It descended from the clouds to strike trains, bridges, supply columns, artillery batteries, and armored formations that kept Germany's armies in the field. Again and again, it returned home carrying damage that would have ended the flight of many other fighters. Its greatest achievement was not measured only by enemy aircraft destroyed or missions completed. It was measured by the lives it protected. The bomber crews who reached England because enemy fighters had been driven away. The infantrymen who advanced because German reinforcements never arrived. The pilots who climbed from scarred cockpits after surviving battles that seemed impossible only hours earlier. Behind every Thunderbolt stood thousands of people whose names rarely appeared in history books. Engineers who transformed ambitious ideas into metal and machinery. Factory workers who assembled engines and wings with extraordinary precision. Armorers who loaded ammunition belts before dawn. Mechanics who repaired shattered aircraft through freezing nights so they could fly again the next morning. Together with the pilots, they formed an unbroken chain of effort that stretched from American factories to the skies over Europe. The Luftwaffe also left an enduring lesson. Its pilots remained among the most skilled aviators of the war, and many fought with exceptional courage despite overwhelming odds during the conflict's final years. Their growing respect for the Thunderbolt was not born from propaganda or rumor. It came from direct experience in combat, where assumptions disappeared quickly and only performance mattered. The P-47 ultimately demonstrated a truth that extends far beyond aviation. In war, appearances can be deceptive. The qualities that seem least impressive at first glance, resilience, reliability, discipline, and the ability to endure, often become the ones that shape history. The Thunderbolt was never the aircraft that looked most likely to dominate the skies. It was simply the aircraft that kept coming back. Mission after mission. Battle after battle. Through flak, machine gun fire, freezing altitudes, and dangerous dives, its broad wings carried thousands of young men across a continent at war. Many never returned. Many others owed their survival to the rugged machine beneath them. Long after the smoke cleared over Europe, the sound of the Thunderbolt's massive radial engine remained a symbol of determination. Not because it was perfect, but because it accomplished exactly what it had been designed to do. The aircraft that some German pilots once dismissed as too heavy and too awkward ultimately helped secure Allied control of the skies. And when its 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns opened fire, the laughter disappeared, replaced by a respect earned in the only place that truly mattered, the battlefield. That is why the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt remains remembered not merely as one of America's greatest fighters, but as one of the most resilient and formidable aircraft ever to fly in the Second World War. 1940's black and white documentary image of German fighter pilots confidently banking toward the bomber stream, believing the bulky American escort is too heavy to threaten them, layered clouds below, subtle engine exhaust, authentic aerial photojournalism with aged film imperfections.